What's up, everybody? Izzy today, back again with another Q&A. Today was leg day, and there's a little physique update at 2:42 right now. On to the first question of the day. With regards to your progress, did you do something significantly wrong? It's like the way you worded this question almost makes it sound like you think I didn't make any progress. I just didn't make as much progress as I wanted. I mean, look, you can just look at the pictures here. Like comparing like to like, my last cruise versus 2 cruises ago, I was up 17 pounds. Now, I'm a little bit higher body fat in the top picture, but I still obviously added quite a bit of tissue. That on the right side is comparing my last 2 diet phases. I don't have an accurate like for like comparison yet because I'm not done with the diet. So the top right is pretty current. That's like last week before I had a week of maintenance calories, and on the bottom was at the very end of my last diet. So I definitely added tissue, probably somewhere in the 5 to 10 pounds range. I won't know exactly until I get leaner. It's just not what I wanted. As far as did I do things significantly wrong, there are definitely things that I could have done better, but I didn't get anything necessarily significantly wrong. The difference is that if you want to gain 15 to 20 pounds of muscle in a single off season, you have to get everything almost perfect. And there were several areas that I did not get perfect. The biggest one was I just kept getting hurt. I hurt my right knee hack squatting without a spotter, and that cost me 2 to 3 months of quad progress. I couldn't really train my right leg that entire time, for 2 months of it anyway. I had repeated pec strains that messed up my shoulder training, chest training, and tricep training, which are my 3 most important muscle groups that really need to be improved. And that I can really only speculate that it was due to not enough internal rotation in my right shoulder, which is usually on the right side. And I'm hoping that I can decrease the frequency of those injuries by pausing all my pressing movements going forward. The biggest thing is that I hired a coach right after I finished my last diet, and I'm not blaming that coach whatsoever, but they had me on 1 to 2 free meals a week, which caused me to gain weight really fast out of the diet. I went from 205 to 230 in 6 weeks before those free meals finally got pulled. And unfortunately, at that point, the damage was sort of already done because in a good off-season phase, you're really only going to push up 30, maybe 40 pounds. Otherwise, you're going to end up getting fat enough that it's hard to lose all the weight that you need to lose in one diet to get in state shape. So I was forced with a decision to either almost hop immediately back into a diet or to push up and have like a longer off season where I got fatter than is optimal. And I chose to go for the latter just because I wasn't really ready at that point to hop right into another diet. However, what that meant is that my off season probably took 2 months longer than it should have. And now there's another 2 months of dieting that gets tacked on as well because I have extra fat to lose that I shouldn't have had to lose in the first place, as my off season never should have been all the way up to 270. It really only should have been up to like 250. So those were the things that cost me the most amount of time. And I think the last thing is more of an optimization versus like doing something drastically wrong, but I don't think my volume levels are optimized yet. Even as of right now, they're not. I need to do some experimentation to figure out what volume levels are going to result in the fastest rate of progress. And while it's interesting and useful to know that I can step forward on as little as 1 set per exercise, I don't think that's where the rate of muscle gain is going to be maximized. So some experimentation there, I think, could potentially increase the rate of muscle gain fairly significantly. Not enough to like make me a pro overnight or anything of that nature, but enough to make a pretty significant difference to the final tally as far as pounds of muscle added at the end of each year. So those are really going to be the main things that I focus on this year: is no fast gaining phases, no fast dieting phases, making sure that I stay on top of my technique to avoid getting injured, and then just optimizing volume. How much body English is acceptable on rows? The sigh here is because this is going to be a really long answer, as there is no one-size-fits-all approach to rows, because it depends what you're trying to get out of the movement, and it also largely depends what equipment that you have available. Bent over rows are a compound lift that trains the entire back complex, meaning it trains the erectors, it trains the scapular retractors, it trains the traps, and it trains the lats. It trains all of them. That makes it great for beginners and early intermediates, because as far as bang for your buck back exercises go, there's probably not anything better than a barbell row. However, as you reach into the advanced stages and even the latter stages of the intermediate phase, lower back recovery starts to become extremely valuable to the point where it's often a limiting factor for your entire training program, especially if you're doing barbell squats, some sort of a heavy hinge, even standing overhead presses and seated overhead presses to some degree will tax the lower back. So you have to be very judicious in how you spend lower back fatigue. And do you really want to spend it on a bent over row when you could be spending it on a deadlift variation that may be yielding you more, and you could do a chest supported row which gives you just as much trap and scapular retractor? When you use body English on a bent over free weight row, you are going to increase the amount of weight that you can use, sometimes fairly dramatically depending on the amount of body English. And that is only going to increase the erector fatigue. So unless you are sure you want to be spending erector fatigue on rows, adding body English to a free weight row makes the SFR worse, in my opinion. Any body English whatsoever, besides maybe a short drop of your chest towards the bar to help you get it short. But any kind of throwing motion or swinging motion in the lengthened is going to drastically increase the weight and increase that lower back fatigue. Now, here's the thing. Even if you're on a chest-supported machine row or a chest-supported T-bar row, you can still use body English. Obviously, the erectors are more or less taken out of the equation, but it still matters, right? So let's discuss that next. Rows have a very extreme natural strength curve that is heavily short biased, meaning the weight that you can get fully locked out with your scapular retraction at maximum is much, much smaller than the amount of weight that you can get to the midway point. And that's because it's almost entirely different musculature that's responsible for those two jobs. Not entirely, but it's just one way to think about it, right? The lats can get a lot more weight to that midway point than the scapular retractors and traps can finish and actually get to touch your chest. So there's two approaches. One is that you can just do rows extremely strictly. It doesn't matter if this is free weight, machine, or anything. You can do this extremely strictly, not worry that it's not a great lat exercise. Just do other things for lats, and then use rows to maximally train the scapular retractors. And that's probably the highest SFR way to do it. Perfectly legit way to do it. Whenever you use body English or even using your lats to throw the weight from the starting position, because often you have a surplus of strength in that starting position and you can ride the momentum to lock out, you are going to balance out the stimulus a bit from pure scapular retractor to getting more to your erectors, because usually body English means a little bit of flexion and extension. You're going to get a little bit more of a lat stimulus because the weight that you use is going to be closer to failure for the lats versus if you do a super strict row, it's not even going to challenge your lats much at all. But that's going to come at a cost. It's going to tax your joints more. It's going to add erector fatigue. It's going to add more central fatigue just from using heavier weights. So what do you want out of a row? That's the number one question. If you're doing a high intensity, low volume program, maybe you want more raw stimulus from a row. So you're going to use a little bit of momentum and use a little bit of body English. You should be able to explain the reasoning for your choice and program appropriately based on it. What's your favorite strength building drug? Dude, these aren't ice cream flavors, man. It's not like chocolate chip or Rocky Road. Which one do you like? These are tools. What if I asked you what's your favorite tool? A hammer, scissors, or a screwdriver? You'd probably look at me like a psycho because you just want the one that's appropriate for the task that you have to do, right? And same thing here. The best drug for rapid strength gains is going to be oral steroids, but they have different side effects, and you'll choose the right one based on the side effects. For example, let's say you're a powerlifter and you don't want to add any water weight. You can look at something like halotestin. But maybe you're a dieted bodybuilder and you want water weight. Adderall. Boom. What did you do to rehab your pec strain? So all I ever do for rehab is really the same thing, because training is rehab. So I just pick loads that don't hurt and I go through range of motion that doesn't hurt. And if I can get through a full range of motion with reduced load, then I use the full range of motion. If I can't do the full range of motion, then I work on increasing range of motion from workout to workout, and I work on increasing load from workout to workout, all while staying below a pain threshold of 2 out of 10, 3 out of 10. And then I just slowly work back up. And usually it only takes me a couple weeks because these aren't full tears, just little strains. If I have free weight strength pressing goals, is machine pressing a waste of time? No, but it is sort of a matter of opportunity cost. And just like with any sort of strength training, powerlifting, whatever, you're going to want to pick the movements that offer the most carryover if the strength goal is really a top priority for you. Now, if you have mixed strength goals with mixed hypertrophy goals, you might have to, make your own personal internal value judgment about picking a movement that's better for hypertrophy but worse for free weight pressing. So, yeah, I can't really answer it more directly than that. How does one become gym bros with Izzy? Well, you see, there's like this super messed up hazing process that involves an initiation, which requires sacrifices, blood sacrifices, that is. Now, I mean, if anybody that trains at Bayshore ever wants to come talk to me, ask me a question, say hi, do so at any time. I'm always happy to talk, always happy to answer questions, offer a spot if anyone needs one. Just tip of the cap to say hello in the morning, whatever, if I see anybody in there from Instagram, I will always say hi. So there's really nothing to it. I know what to do to get perfect, but I fail to consistently apply. I'm weak-willed. First of all, if you know what to do to be perfect, pass that information along to me. I would love to know. I'll actually do it. Now, here's the thing, man. A lot of times the main reason why you're not doing something that you think you want to do is because it's just a should for you. It's not a must. If your life was on the line, would you start following the steps that you're failing to consistently apply right now? Of course you would. Of course you would. You do it all. Let me ask you something. How many times have you failed to make it to the toilet to take a shit in your whole life? And if you ever have failed, was it for a lack of trying? How do you have the discipline? So the ironclad, iron-willed discipline to always make it to the toilet when you need to shit. That's because there's a standard in your brain where it's not optional. It's not an option for you to just be like, well, today I think I'm just going to shit my pants. Now, honestly, what are your reasons for feeling so strongly about not shitting your pants? Would it really be that bad? Would it really be that bad? I mean, you might have to wash that pair of underwear and that pair of pants. You might have to evacuate public for a second and clean yourself up. But would this ruin your financial future? Would it make it so that you could never get a partner again? Would it make you fat instantly to shit your pants? It's not even that big of a deal if you think about it, if you just shit your pants. But there's an emotional reaction there to that, right? No way am I going to shit my pants in public. That's tremendously embarrassing. That's mortifying. I would never let that happen. And yet, there's not that same level of emotional reaction about going to the gym X amount of times per week like you said you would, setting aside X percentage of your paycheck like you said you would. And that's because you're not emotional enough about it. You're emotional about not pants. It's so embarrassing. But you're not emotional about whatever this thing is that you're not doing consistently. Let me tell you the truth, man. You don't want it bad enough. You're not hungry. And the reason is you're not emotional enough about it. Your reasons aren't strong enough. Here's what I want you to do. Go find a mirror and imagine that you're looking at yourself 5 years into the future. This version of you 5 years in the future has not done anything they said they were going to do. They've consistently failed to apply all the things that you're talking about. How do you feel about this person? What do you look like having failed to have done all that for 5 years? How do your loved ones feel about you? How do you feel about you? Now go 20 years in the future, failing to do what you were supposed to do for 20 years. What does that person look like? What does their life look like? Come back to now. Go 5 years into the future again. But this time, what is the person has done everything they said they were going to do? Consistently applied all of it. What does that person look like? 20 years in the future, did everything you said you were going to do. What does that life look like? If you're not making this strong enough to bring tears to your eyes, you're not doing it right. Hacks versus leg press, question mark. Hack squats always seem so much more intense. I don't really know what the actual question is here. In my experience, any squat variation will tend to be more systemically fatiguing than a leg press variation. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that you are actually moving your entire body through space. So there is always some degree of axial loading in any kind of squat, even a hack squat where your back is supported by a pad. Whereas in a leg press, your hips are in a fixed position. As far as the muscular trained, it's going to be almost identical, minus the whole core thing that I just talked about. So in my experience, set for set, a hack squat is more stimulating and more fatiguing than a leg press, but leg presses can have a very, very, very high perceived effort. Every rep can seem hard. Would amphetamines be a good pre-workout ingredient? You know what, man? Fuck it. Let's throw some amphetamines in there. Let's just turn the gym into a club. Like, every gym needs a bar in there, not a smoothie bar. Like, let's get lit. Let's get fucking lit at the gym. Serve straight up cocktails. Did I mention that we need a station to do lines? Because, I mean, I don't know how you're supposed to set, like, a hack squat PR without taking a quick bump. P.S. Some companies have been busted for putting amphetamines in pre-workouts. Do you need to be in a surplus to gain muscle? No, obviously not. This is actually shown in research at this point in naturals that there are definitely documented cases of not just fat people, but people with relatively normal body composition being in a calorie deficit and still gaining muscle. Here's the problem. Recomposition isn't something that you should intentionally try to do. It's just something that happens when sufficient conditions are met. And those sufficient conditions tend to be a good diet and nutrition plan, being really far away from your genetic potential, using performance-enhancing drugs, being fat, okay? Like, having things just have to kind of come together in the right way, and then you can kind of accidentally recomp when all those conditions are met. When you set out to intentionally recomposition, it's just like a crapshoot. You might get some recomposition, you might not. It just depends on if all these other sufficient conditions are in place. So I wouldn't try to recomp. Sorry if I missed the point. What if I have a strength training background, but now I'm good at 10 to 15 reps? Dude, oh my fucking God. That was a 5 to 6 minute answer about why it doesn't matter whether or not you're good at what rep range or why. Because effective reps are going to be what determines the hypertrophy stimulus, which has nothing to do with calculations about E1RM. If you need more clarification on it, go watch the YouTube video from yesterday, again, where I talk about it for 6 straight minutes. Are volume requirements heavily influenced by whether or not you choose movements that have a big stretch component? Well, it's not just a stretch component. For example, consider leg extensions versus sissy squats. Sissy squats have a huge stretch component. I mean, there's really almost nothing you can do that stretches the quads as much as a sissy squat. Leg extensions, on the other hand, don't really stretch the quads that much or at all. The machine just doesn't go far back enough. But roughly, they're pretty much the same to recover from. Neither one is difficult to recover from. On the other hand, let's say a barbell back squat. Even if it doesn't give you that really painful stretch on your quads, way harder to recover from than a set of leg extensions or sissy squats. And it's way more stimulative as well. So, yes, I mean, your movement selection absolutely influences your volume needs, and that's why it's sort of ridiculous to be like 9 sets of quads is the same as 9 sets of quads no matter the movement or the RIR or anything else. But there's other factors besides just stretch. But Adderall isn't good for bodybuilding, right? When I was taking it, it suppressed my appetite a lot. Well, when I say sports ball, I'm not talking about bodybuilding, man. I'm talking about like hockey, baseball, football, basketball, you know, things that have offense and defense. Quote unquote, real sports. That said, can you not think of maybe one time in the year where a bodybuilder might want some appetite suppression? Maybe contest prep, perhaps? All right, everybody, you know the drill. If you like the video, leave any comments or questions in the comments below. Subscribe if you haven't already. And of course, have a wonderful rest of your day and enjoy the rest of your weekend if you're listening to this when it came out.